This is probably my most requested video that I get on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, across all platforms. Everybody wants me to record these big verses, my opinion about them, my stance on them, how I got to that place. So, we're going to unclobber the six most misused verses in the Bible. So, Passage 1, Leviticus 18:22. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. First question we always have to ask ourselves, is this for you? Well, are you a Levite? Are you a Hebrew person? Are you in exile in the wilderness? Are you still living under the old covenant? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then yes, this is for you. If you answered no to any of those questions, let's move to the next thing we have to look at. Why is it there? Well, the Old Testament is a Christian person's history, and we need to know it. We need to know what's in it, why it was there, who it was written to. We also need to see that there are 613 Levitical laws in the book of Leviticus. We need to recognize the difficulty in which it would be to keep all 613 of them, which is why Jesus ultimately came, because nobody can fulfill the law. Nobody can fulfill the law. So, you may say, I am fulfilling the law, or we're all living under the law. No, we're not, because you're allowed to eat pork and shrimp and mixed milk and meat, and you're allowed to cut your hair, and you can share a bed with your spouse within 66 days of having a child. You don't stone your disobedient children. We are not following the letter of the law. It's just not what we're doing. So, what can we learn from it being in there? We can learn that Jesus came to fulfill the letter of the law. We can also learn that the people wandering around in wilderness after the Exodus were held to a much higher standard than the world around them. We can learn that our history shows that for the time that they were trying to fulfill the law, they were keeping very strict boundaries. And yet they still failed, which is why they still had to do animal sacrifices. Passage number 2, Leviticus 20:13. If a man has sexual relations with a man as one does a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They are to be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads. I'm going to ask the same questions as the last one. Is this for us? What can we learn? Why is it there? The same questions. Is this written for us? Are you a Levite? Are you a Hebrew? Are you in exile? Are you a Jew? Are you living under the law? If the question to all those is no, then we have to move to what can we learn? Why is it there? It's there for the same reasons that the first one is there. All of these parameters in Leviticus were to keep people safe in the wilderness from, why can't you eat pork? Because there wasn't a good way to cook pork without getting trichinosis. Why can't you eat shellfish? Do you want to eat shellfish in a desert? Foodborne illness. The whole point was to keep people safe. We can learn that I'm sorry, something is scratching my throat. We can learn a lot of things about their devotion versus our own devotion, because 613 laws they were keeping when we only have to keep 2 seems like a lot. Passages 3 and 4. Why do I put them together? I'll tell you in a minute. Passage 1, 1 Corinthians 6:9. Or do you not know that wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor the idolaters, nor the adulterers, nor men who have sex with men. That's the whole verse. It stops in the middle of a sentence. So people who quote 1 Corinthians 6:9 to me don't even say it in context. And 1 Timothy 1:10. It starts in the middle of a sentence and ends before that sentence is over. So Timothy for sexually immoral, for those practicing homosexuality, for slave traders, blood purgers, and whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine. Doesn't finish the sentence. Starts in the middle of the sentence, doesn't finish the sentence. But why do I put them together? I put them together because both places have this word that in Greek is arsenokoites. Arsenokoites. It was translated in every version prior to 1946 as one who abuses or destroys others. It is used 87 times in contemporary language with the New Testament, first century, contemporary language of the first century, 87 times. In all of the 87 other places it is used, it is talking about pedophilia. Now, why in 1946 does this pop up into an English Bible translated as homosexual? Well, let's think about what the historical context would be for that. In the historical context, what had just ended? World War II had just ended, and young men were coming back to the United States and electing to stay with their partners from the war instead of going back to their high school sweethearts and pumping out more war machine American babies. So we had to do something to make it look like it wasn't allowed. And so, during the Revised Standard Version translation of the Bible, people paid for that word to be added in those two places. Do your own research on that one because that one is particularly interesting. Passage number 5, Romans 1:27. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relationship with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received themselves the due penalty for their error. So, you're plucking one sentence out of a further context, and let's talk about what's actually happening. Paul is writing a letter to the Romans, like I would write to my nephew. Dear Bennett, I hope fifth grade is going well. You are almost a middle schooler. You only have 7 weeks of school left. Blah, 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 blah. Paul is saying, Dear Romans, here's what's going on. You guys are participating in pagan temple worship. That's uncool. You guys are abusing the system where Romans are allowing masters to sleep with slaves and men to sleep with children and women to sleep with children. You guys are not understanding how the power dynamics are supposed to work. You guys are being abusive to people. And so he is having that conversation to a particular time, a particular context, in response to the fact that they are participating in both pagan temple worship practices and Roman practice. They are neither pagan any longer, nor should they be participating in Roman norms and social constructs. So Paul is exhorting a specific people in a specific time. He was not talking about consensual relationships. He was talking about abusive relationships. Once again, encourage you to learn the Greek and the historical context, read it in the original language, and know what's happening in the first century when Paul's writing it. Last but certainly not least, everybody wants to say, what about Sodom and Gomorrah? Sodom was destroyed because of sodomy. Your own book tells you that that's not true. Ezekiel 16:49 says, "Now the sin of your sister was that she was arrogant, she and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy. They were inhospitable. They were destroyed because of how they treated their neighbor." So, let's move to what does Jesus say? Because if we want to talk about what Jesus says, Jesus doesn't talk about homosexuality at all. Not one word. Jesus says absolutely nothing about homosexuality. But what he does say in John 13, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. He also says in Matthew 7, let's just read Matthew 7. Let's get Matthew 7 out and just actually read it. Let's not just do the highlight version. I should have been more prepared. I didn't think I was going to read it out loud. Thought we were just going to talk about the context of Matthew 7. Ooh, I'm going to hiccup. Matthew 7. Judge not, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be used against you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? And then it skips down, and I'd like to say this for sure. Do not give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls before pigs. If you do, they will trample them under their feet and turn and tear you into pieces. We seem to have forgotten that we all have junk in our own eyes. There's not one that is perfect except for Jesus Christ. So we need to worry about what's in our own eye, sweep our own porch, wash our own laundry, make our own bed before we start thinking about anybody else's stuff. Matthew 25 says, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to those who thirst, visit the sick and in prison, take care of the orphan and the widow. These are the things that Jesus said. Jesus also said, they will know that you are my followers by your love. Jesus didn't say, but John, 1 John 4, let's just go ahead and read that too because it's so good. 1 John 4, and we can take a lot of John was the beloved disciple. So if there's anybody who knows the things that Jesus stood for, it's like saying that John was his best friend. 1 John 4, starting with verse 7. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is what love is. Not that we loved God, but he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. This is how we know what love is. In him, and he is in us. He has given us his spirit, and we have seen and testify that the Father has sent the Son, the Savior of the world. Skipping down to 16b. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so we may be confident on the day of judgment in this world that we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment, and the one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. Whoever claims to love God and hates his brother or his sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. It's pretty simple, if you ask me. There are affirming churches, Episcopalians, Disciples of Christ, most United Methodist churches now that the GMC has split off. But you can Google LGBTQ affirming churches in your area and find one that's suitable for your worship style preferences, close to your house, etc., etc., etc. People ask me all the time, why does it matter? Why is this so important to you? It's real simple. Being LGBTQ affirming saves lives. Kids that are LGBTQ plus have a higher unaliving themselves rate than any other population on the planet. It's important because I want kids to live. It's important because I'm an adult who shouldn't bully children into wanting to not be on this planet anymore. And I belong to a denomination that shouldn't bully kids into wanting to die. One one supportive and affirming adult in a kid's life can make all the difference. Why do I say it on the internet every single day? On TikTok Live, on my Facebook page, on Instagram, wherever. Because every day I pray that some kid that their parents don't get it, or their church doesn't get it, or their school doesn't get it, or their friends don't get it, come across and see that there are people who love Jesus, who want to do better, that have a place for them, have a place at the table for them, want them to survive and thrive and grow into adults. And sometimes that just means showing up instead of showing out. So it's important to me because it keeps kids alive. And that, at the end of the day, is more important than any doctrine, any opinion, anything else. We have to get to a place where kids are safe and keep themselves safe. That's why it's important to me. And that's all I've got for today.